Benjamin Harrison. Harrison ran a country that was bursting at the seams with change. The Oklahoma land rush saw Americans rushing for new lives on the final frontier. While brave souls ventured west, the proud city women of New England organized the Women's Suffrage Act. On an economic platform, Harrison brought about the McKinley Tariff. His beliefs in the protection of the American people were shown through the actions mentioned, and his high value of absolute American success. William McKinley. McKinley viewed the world as a game the United States was not currently playing. In the left corner, the troubled Philippines were in revolt. Further down that side of the international board, China was allowing the open door policy with America, guaranteeing trade of goods and labor between the countries. The game of foreign policies is an ever-changing one, and McKinley quickly had to change scopes to the outbreak of war with Spain. McKinley's ultimate goal of moving the United States onto the international playing field was achieved. Theodore Roosevelt. Roosevelt had one of the most broadly successful presidencies to date. The camera starts inwardly, noting the Food and Drug Inspection Clause. He upheld the social contract, guaranteeing the protection of the government to loyal citizens. Roosevelt encouraged governmental action and intervention. He believed in international improvement, and his passion for such spread to all aspects of his administration. The Russo-Japanese Peace led leery Americans to rest easy. Overall, the actions and policies of President Roosevelt finally showed the people what Enlightenment thinkers had dreamt of all along. William Howard Taft. Taft was interested in moving the United States further into the playing field of the world. The nations at large were moving, and the shift of power was constant, and if America played its cards right, hegemonic power would be bestowed upon the young nation. He continued a friendly relationship with the Japanese and built trust therein. His dollar democracy policy in South America bred mistrust, but managed to settle a few bickering affairs with Canada. Taft's domestic policy was surrounded with social changes. The foundation of the NAACP showed a dramatic removal of social bias between races. In an attempt to maintain the idea of fairness for all men, Taft broke down monopolies such as Standard Oil. Taft was a champion of the American spirit for success and a world-renowned character.
Woodrow Wilson. It would be impossible to speak of President Wilson without the subject of the First World War dominating the conversation. Wilson had perhaps the most weighing decisions of all time to make for America, to enter World War I or not to enter World War I. In the beginning, Wilson hung back, allowing the powers of Europe to handle their own affairs. He valued peace and would not engage in a conflict that did not directly concern America. Towards the end, the ragged sons of England cried for fresh American aid, and it was given. As Winston Churchill once said, "There's nothing like American moral to end a war." On November 11th, Wilson signed an armistice, a ceasefire that would end the war. The date is celebrated in the United States Day as Veterans Day.
Warren G. Harding. The short-lived administration of President Harding was one of isolationism, exposing old enemies, and what he hoped to be a return to normalcy. In the aftermath of World War I, Harding was strongly against the rise of the League of Nations, refusing to submit jurisdiction to an international body. His fear over the loss of American sovereignty was justified in his eyes. In 1921, Harding passed legislation that Wilson before him had vetoed, the immigration quota, considerably restricting the amount of immigrants allowed in the United States. Later in his term, the elusive Klu Klux Klan was exposed and promptly dealt with. Harding promised the American people a return to what he called normalcy, and to settle down, normalcy is a word and has been in dictionaries since 1857. Art attack in 1923 ended Harding's administration, passing the scepter of power to his vice president, Calvin Coolidge.
Calvin Coolidge. Some are born with greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. And then there's President Coolidge. Inheriting the presidency of the death of Harding, Coolidge continued many of the dead president's policies. He highly valued American business. He protected the economic succession of business with McKinley Tariff. He continued to cut immigration numbers, allotting more jobs for natively born American citizens. He believed the government should have a small role in the ordinary lives of the average American, and conducted his administration thusly. The Teapot Dome scandal was a major issue during 1924. It would not be resolved by the Supreme Court until 1929, when the transfer of money was brought into light and the perpetrators of the oil scheme found guilty. Although the action of the Teapot Dome scheme took place under Harding, the case was a major issue during the Coolidge presidency.
Herbert Hoover. President Hoover was faced with a crisis that is well documented in American history, both fictionally and historically. The crash of the New York Stock Exchange in 1929 wreaked havoc upon Americans. The time that followed is widely known as the Great Depression, a time studied by sophomores in such work as The Great Gatsby and To Kill a Mockingbird. Large-scale bank failures led to high rates in crime and a skyrocketing number of citizens who lived below the poverty line. Hoover negated the use of large governmental aid and is recorded to have genuine compassion for those in need.
Franklin D. Roosevelt. The United States was on the mend from its tragic economic depression. On the horizon, however, was not a shiny new world full of hope. Rather, the sun was glinting off of Japanese airplanes releasing bombs onto Pearl Harbor. The attack on Hawaii was the first and only loss of American life on American soil in either of the Great Wars. Roosevelt, who had tried to remain out of the Second Great War, was forced into action. Roosevelt saw the pouring of American soldiers into the plains in Europe, but would die in office in 1945 before the final outcome of the war happened. Harry S. Truman. If the decisions made by any previous president were bombshells, Truman held the Russian Tsar in his hands. The art of war had advanced to deadly and frightening accurate styles of killing. In one of the most heated debates in history, Truman chose to drop the atomic bomb on Japan, ending conflict. American foot soldiers liberated German encampments across Europe, and by 1945, World War II ended. Roosevelt's highly valued peace was once again restored, but at the price of a long-lingering notion that the power to destroy the world was in the hands of mortal men. In a break-trend motion of humanitarianism, Truman gave a great amount of aid to the Soviet-pressured nations, hoping to gain their trust and contain their spread of communism.